Oh, we're going to be recording this. I always love to break the fourth wall. So, hello, everyone. I'm Sean. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wavy. If you're here live, we're really excited to have you at this event about building better ERGs. If you're watching this in the future, thank you for watching. We're glad to see you here. I'm going to get into a quick introduction here. And I promise I'll keep the intro about Wavy and about this community nice and speedy so that we can get to the good stuff and start chatting with Asafo and Nia all about today's topic of building better ERGs. So let's dive in. Why are we here and why is Wavy hosting this event? At Wavy, we believe that great work happens when people feel really connected to each other. Not just to each other, but to their work. They know it matters, and to the wider mission and vision of the company, can feel that sense of community and belonging at work. When you have all three of those ingredients in place, you can build really great, really highly connected organizations. And that's what we're here to help make happen. And we believe that this can happen regardless of where employees are located. A lot of the teams that we support are distributed around the world. What is Wavy? For those of you who don't know, we've built the Culture OS for distributed teams. You can think of it in two ways. First is the tech side of things, a platform to plan, manage, and measure the impact of all your employee events and programming. This can be for company-wide events, ERGs, departments, cross-departmental, you name it. And our goal is to make it easy and breezy to run your events and programming and get much better visibility into the impact it's having. The second thing to think about, and I'm doing the breezy version today, is our content. So not only do we play in the technology side of things, but we also care a lot about the actual content and programming that teams are running for employees. So we have a marketplace of activities spanning across team building, well-being, learning and development, you name it, that you can book for your teams. We also have free templates to run your own activities, icebreakers, games, challenges, you name it. And if that's something you need support with, we are always here to help. We work with a lot of globally distributed teams that have employees in different time zones, different countries, or maybe co-located in different cities, and really help them to bridge the gap between these locations, creating much better sense of connection and community at work. We're big data nerds, not just assessing the success of your programming on how many people have engaged, looking a little bit deeper on how much more productive were you in running the event? Did it make a meaningful impact to connection? Are people feeling better about life and culture at your company as a result? These are the sorts of things we dive into. I think that's enough of an intro on Wavy. Obviously, we're here to chat with anyone who'd like, but I can promise you're going to walk away with 4 things from today's event. One, and most important, is valuable tips and ideas that I think you'll be able to put in place at your own company or share with your peers. 2, we always share the recording if you want to share with your team members, rewatch or dive into some of these helpful tidbits, that'll be there. And then we always like to pass over a Wavy gift. So whether you need help on that next event, we've got a lot of seasonal activities, end of year celebrations, that sort of thing coming up. If you need help there, we're happy to offer you a credit towards your first event with Wavy. And if you're interested in diving a bit deeper, we do offer the first free month in Wavy Pro, which is our premium plan, getting you access to all those features. I know. That's not what we're here for today, but want to make sure I set the context of why we host these community events, and make sure that we're not on our heels for the rest of the event of when we're going to drop the promotional element. It's done. We're here to help and here to chat if you'd like, but now I'm excited to dive into today's topic. So with me today, we've got Asafo Barker. Asafo, I would love for you to introduce yourself to everyone here, how you really got into this space. And I think you took some twists and turns that maybe are unique to the HR and DEI&B space. And then Nia, excited to dive into an intro with you as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. Hi, everyone. Osafo, he, him pronouns. Really happy to be here. So I am I like to say a recovering attorney who now does work in HR and DEI&B. Started out a career multifaceted, a lot of different interests, starting out from sciences, which took me down a path in terms of chemistry, potentially going into medicine, and landing up where I'm at currently now, dealing with HR and DEI. I think the through line from all of that is this desire to really help people and really connect with people. And so I'm fortunate in my current role at Way to really lead those efforts to make sure that we are supporting employees, really creating a sense of belonging, and really using that as fuel to unlock innovation in our work and products. So really happy to be here. Look forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Nia, would love to hear more from you too.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nia Darville Stokes-Hicks, she, her pronouns. Similar to Osafo, I also had a twisty journey into DEI and HR. I actually started in speech language pathology and audiology, and I am so sorry for those notifications. I'm on Do Not Disturb, but my family is not blocked from that, and so they are,
Okay.
you know,
Zoom cuts
doing
out
their
more
thing.
sound than
Great.
you think. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. But I also had a winding road into DEIB. I started off in speech language pathology and audiology, and it ended up pivoting into really just creating spaces and structures that help people be able to do their best work. And that has looked like diversity and inclusion work. And so currently I serve as the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Allyship, and Social Impact, or IDEAS Experience Director at RisePoint. And I'm also the creator of a card game called the Known Card Game that we're going to talk about in a little bit, I think, Sean. But I'm just very passionate about, like I said, creating the spaces and structures for people to do their best work. And that means creating workplaces where they can bring their unique perspectives and talents and ideas to come together to create value for an organization.
I love that. I also
Mm.
love the ideas title. That's great. So I think we're gonna get into the card game faster than you think. But when we often work with ERG leaders or help people and culture teams get their ERG leaders set up with tools and resources to run programming at Wavy, and we get questions all the time about best practices, what stage should we be setting up affinity groups or ERG groups, how do we get budget approval? How do we prove value? So we're going to be diving into all of this today. And thank you for those who joined, those who RSVP'd and put questions in. We're going to be using some of those to guide today's discussion. And when we started putting together this event, absolutely no brainer to bring Nia and Osafo on board to really answer these questions and lead the discussion. And I always like to do an icebreaker. This is an interactive event. We want you taking part. So Nia told me about her game, her card game, and I thought that's perfect. Why don't we do something with that for an icebreaker today? So Nia,
Yeah.
take it away.
Yes. So I've got a question for you, and I can't wait to hear your answer. But before I ask you the question, I'll just tell you a little bit about what Known is. And basically, Known is a card game that really gamifies connection and gamifies inclusion in workplaces. And so the idea behind it is it's hard to practice inclusion when you don't necessarily know who the people are that you are including. And so the goal of Known is to get to know other people on a deeper level, to build empathy and really build that foundation for inclusion. And so the question that I have for you today is, if you could wake up tomorrow with an expert skill level in anything, what would it be? And so my husband's answer to this question is singing. He would like to be able to sing. For
Oh,
me, I would love to have an expert skill in investing. I think if I woke up tomorrow and knew exactly how to invest my money and get the largest returns, I think I would be incredibly happy. What about you, Sean? Do you have an answer to this question?
this is a hard one. I I really enjoy running, but I find it to be pretty hard. So if I could wake up tomorrow and become like expert level runner, I think that'd be fun. But I don't know. I think if you become an expert level runner and you're doing ultra marathons and that sort of thing, it ends up being pretty hard on you down the road. So maybe that's not a good one. Um, I yeah, I also would like to sing. That would be great. I play guitar, but mostly only sing in private. So it'd be cool to be able to sing and have the confidence to do it in front of audiences. Osafo, hopefully that's given you enough time to brainstorm this.
Yeah,
So,
and this actually dovetails really nicely into one of my passions, which is travel. So for me, it would easily be languages, being fluent in multiple languages. I think
oh,
that would be something that I'd love to be skilled in. And who knows, like that could lead to work at the State Department or some other sort of agency where that skill is really valuable. So yeah, easy for me,
oh,
languages.
that's a good answer. That's a really good answer. We've got some really good ones here. You've got some friends. Jeff wants to learn languages, speak 5 languages perfectly. We've got Amanda saying she'd also like to do accounting and investing, singing or acting, accounting and Microsoft Excel. The Microsoft Excel one, Lucy, is very attainable. We can do that. And to be a pilot, fly planes. That's pretty cool. That's a great question. Nia, we're gonna definitely share some info about your card game in the follow-up and where people can find it. Who knows, maybe we'll even get connected and help folks and teams get access to the game after this. So thank you for kicking us off with that. Um, Now, before we dive in, I mean, I'm sure this is going to segue into the topic of ERGs, but I would love to hear a little bit from both of you just to set the context. I love real life examples of what does the ERG, affinity group, interest group, belonging committee kind of structure look like at your companies today? I'm sure people in the room will resonate or share with some of that, and then we'll dive into setting up a strong foundation for ERGs after that. Osafa, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to kick it off. And so, just by way of background, I've been at Way about 9 months now, and sort of Way has been on their DEI journey in terms of really thinking about setting the vision within the past year and a half or so about DEIB. Part of that was putting in some structures that could support the work. And so, one of the things that we've been able to launch since I've arrived is a new belonging committee. And so this committee really has as its mission to really activate and embed DEIB into sort of Way's culture. And so the committee, it's a cross-functional group of folks from across the organization, different departments, folks who bring different identities, skills, perspectives to really help activate and think about how DEIB shows up in our work and culture. The committee will focus in three primary areas. So one is around culture. So you could think about how do we celebrate, how do we educate, how do we recognize the different cultural observances and sort of moments that are really important to us as an organization in terms of our population. The other is really around career. So thinking about, again, how do we support bringing people into an organization in an inclusive way and creating that sense of belonging all the way through their employee experience while they're at Way. And then the last piece is really communication, really focused on how do we communicate so that everyone understands the importance of this work, so that everyone is aware and sort of is engaged. And so those are sort of the 3 pillars that this committee will really sort of activate around. And so we've got a full lineup of programming that we're building out alongside Wavy. So it's really exciting.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I've got some more questions there, but want to hear from Nia first.
For sure. So, similar to Osafo, I just joined Rise Point as well. I'm a little bit newer though. I'm 2 months in. And so Rise Point is a unique company in that it's a merger of 3 legacy companies who all had distinct DEIB initiatives and structures and things of that nature. And so I was brought in to help create a unified single pathway forward for us as RisePoint, and how we pursue ideas. So inclusion, diversity, equity, allyship, and social impact. And so what it looks like right now, is that we're actually getting ready to launch our care groups, which is what we call our ERGs. And that the CARE acronym stands for Community, Advocacy, Representation, and Education, which are the pillars that our ideas program is built on. And so we are getting ready to launch care groups. We're getting ready to launch interest groups, and also an educational task force that helps to create asynchronous resources for our company who have people from different time zones and countries, and ability to join live calls, and some who can't join live calls. And so this task force's goal and objective is to create asynchronous resources that help people learn more about ideas, about celebrations, about different things that are going on across the organization. So those are the three initiatives we're focusing on for the rest of 2024.
Love that. And how big is the company, just so that people have that?
It's 1,700 people.
Okay. And Osafo, what about you and the team
We're we're significantly smaller. We're about 90 employees.
Yeah. And but you're within a larger enterprise too. So I was curious what the dynamic is, like how much does your work spread to other brands within the company, or
Yeah.
are they helping with strategy?
Yeah, thanks so much. So we're Way is part of the specialty beauty division of Procter and Gamble. So we're a part of five beauty brands that are under the P&G umbrella. I would say that we're probably the furthest along in terms of our DEI journey. However, P&G does have a broader equity and inclusion department that focuses on strategy and activation. We're not as embedded there. We're still connected in some ways, but we definitely are leading and charting our own path in terms of DEIB at this moment, but obviously have access to resources and sort of overlapping, components between the larger organization and specific to our population. We are smaller, and so the belonging committee reflects that. We don't have we're not at a stage where we have even specific interest groups per se, or even ERGs. And so this is a way to just start to build those foundational pieces of that work.
Awesome. I'm gonna get us started with some of the audience questions. And for those who are here live, like you can definitely put some questions in the chat and we can answer live, but you may recognize some of your questions in this too. So we had a few questions on this topic on what's the best way to get started with ERGs. I mean, I think some of what you just spoke to in forming a belonging committee, and thinking about that in relation to overall company size, as an important part of that. But Osafo, could you share a little bit more on just getting started, and then Nia, we're gonna popcorn over to you for a follow-up question.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, what I've seen is that most ERGs or interest groups really just form from an organic place where you've got employees within a population really wanting to come together around a shared identity, shared sort of interests, and that can be sort of a galvanizing start to sort of building connection, feeling a sense of belonging in an organization. And then what I think that looks like, is just, connection in terms of potlucks, so, really, just lunchtime, like as a really sort of um, uh, easy way to start to build those connections and get to know each other as colleagues. And I think that's usually the springboard to start to be moving along the path of a more formalized approach.
Yeah.
And so, where, you think about as you get more formalized, you think about sort of what are the needs of the organization, what's the impact that you can have, How are you thinking about, sort of that particular demographic group that you might be a part of, and where it sits within the broader organization in terms of opportunities to help effectuate positive change. So that's really sort of thinking about the size of the organization, what the actual mission and focus of the organization is, to be able to think about, where are we? Do we have a threshold of folks who can actually, leads into even a governance structure, like, do we have enough people in place to action the things that we want to do? So all of those things are considerations as you start to think about, forming a group around a shared identity or interest.
Awesome. Thank you. We actually work with a facilitator, with a host. His name's Maurice, but his company's called The Stew, and does a lot of different experiences and sessions that are all focused on belonging, on DEI&B education, but rooted in food and sharing culinary experiences together. So the potluck reminded me of him. Nia, we had an interesting question here. I loved your answer to it in our prep call. But how do, in thinking about getting started and bringing ERGs to life internally, a big piece of that is getting leadership on board, not just on board with the idea, but also backing it with proper budget, resources, etc. We had a great question here on how do you get leadership to buy into the idea of ERGs if they see them as divisive, which is too bad that's an instinct, but curious your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, to back up a little bit, how do you get leadership involved, period? Or how do you get leadership buy-in, period? I've been doing a lot of research lately on the moral case versus the business case for DEI. And it's really interesting because obviously, if you're here and you've been a DEI practitioner, you know the importance of building a business case for senior leadership. But also thinking about how business cases typically turn off the people who are actually doing the work or volunteering for the work. And so balancing the business case, which is it's good for our bottom line, with the moral case, which is it's just a good thing for us to do, is a tricky balance to strike, but it's an important balance to find. So I think the first thing I would say is strike a balance that works both for your senior leadership team, as well as the people who you are looking to involve and include in the work. And that may mean differentiating your messaging. That may mean you have specific presentations and decks catered to senior leadership to help secure that buy-in. And maybe you have separate decks that focus a little bit more on the moral case when speaking to employees. So that's one thing to think about, is differentiating your message. Another thing to think about is the order in which you launch initiatives. I think it's really important when you launch initiatives that everyone in the organization can see themselves in at least one. And for people who might not be underrepresented or fit within a specific identity group, interest groups are a really great opportunity to help increase the amount of spaces people can see themselves in. And so I always recommend launching both ERGs and interest groups at the same time, because that way people can easily say, well, I may not be a part of the Black community, but I do enjoy running. And so I can join this running group over here. But another interesting and a very important piece is really emphasizing allyship. ERGs are great for people who identify as a part of the community that the ERGs serve, but also for people who want to be better allies to those specific communities. And so really emphasizing the opportunity and the gift of joining these different communities to learn how to activate on behalf of the communities, even if you don't identify as a part of one of them, is incredibly important. So that's what I would say. Really think about your messaging, make sure you're differentiating your message based on the audience, but also think about launching both interest groups, identity groups, and emphasizing allyship with those identity groups when you do.
Awesome. those are some really great steps. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
I'm curious to hear both of your experience on the budget side of things. Have you ever had difficulty getting budget approved for this? I know we got a couple of questions, a few questions on insights around budget setting. I know it obviously varies on team size, company performance, that sort of thing. And we have a few benchmarks at Wavy, but as specific as you'd like to get, Osafo, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think budget, obviously is a resource, and I think it's thinking about how does that align to sort of what the purpose and the mission, the goals of the specific ERG are, and
Yeah.
thinking about that as sort of a really important factor in terms of the approach. I think there's many approaches that you can take. I think organizations sometimes take a one size fits all where everyone gets the same piece of the pie in terms of the allocation of resources. Sometimes what you'll find is that um, it's not used in the same way, right? An organization might be, one ERG might be doing a lot more robust programming and initiatives, and so might actually require more. So I think thinking about, does it make sense to tailor the budget to the actual maturity of a particular ERG in terms of its purpose, sort of how sort of proactive it is in terms of its programming initiatives in a particular year. I think that's a really strong approach. I think, again, to Nia's point around the business case, I think really advocating, this is where I think it's helpful to have really strong executive sponsors as well
Yep.
associated with an ERG who can also lend that additional voice and support to making sure that there's funding to meet the needs of the group. I think supporting the group there's many ways to do it, but I think resourcing an ERG with financial wherewithal is an important piece. And so not only you as the team, the HR team, or the DEI team that's supporting them, but also thinking about the influence that your executive sponsors will have in those rooms to be able to really advocate alongside your team to really get the budget that's needed for a particular ERG.
Yeah, that's really great. We've definitely heard of companies also compensating ERG leaders, having a set budget. Maybe it's to use quarterly, maybe it's to use twice a year. Again, depends on your company size. But so that you can get together, whether that's online, hybrid, or in person, get together for social or learning or bringing in a professional around the theme or belonging group of your ERG. These are things that we've seen. Nia, what's your experience been on? And I don't want to stick to the budget question, but it gets asked a lot. I think it's where people really need help, like how to advocate for this.
Yeah.
What's your experience been there?
Yeah, definitely. I loved everything Osafo said. And something about me, if you've worked with me before, you know that I love structure. Absolutely love structure. I think it is the key to making sure ERGs thrive. And so when I launch ERGs or restructure existing ERGs, I actually try to standardize ERG goals across all of the different groups. And I create those goals based on the company goals. And so I look at, okay, what is the company trying to do? For us at Rise Point, there's something we call the Golden Triangle, which is around culture, execution, and strategy. And so when I was building out our big rocks or our KPIs for our ERG groups, I built them based on how they can support that Golden Triangle.
Mm.
And I took it even a step further and broke it down and said, okay, if we want the ERGs to create synergy across departments and create community and connection across departments to enable synergy, we need to make sure we have at least X number of connection events for this population per year.
Mm.
And taking it a step further, going, okay, I have 3 leads here. This particular lead will be responsible for planning that connection event. So you take it all the way down to the lead level. And when you do that for all of the different groups, you're able to see what outcomes, what initiatives you want them to produce at minimum by the end of the year, and you can start assigning costs to that. So you can kind of generalize a cost for a speaker. I know we have one of our goals is produce at least one synchronous company-wide educational resource. And so knowing that that has a cost associated with it, baking that into the budget, knowing that you have connection events for members. I may want to bake in a certain amount of money for prizes and attendance and marketing and things like that. So I say start at what are the company's goals? Tie those goals directly to what your ERG goals are, and then tie that to specific activities that you want each ERG to present at minimum. That doesn't mean that ERGs can't do above and beyond. Maybe you want to do an additional ad hoc budget where people can apply for more funding depending on what initiative they have. Something else we have built in is if you are going to receive funding, it needs to be in pursuit of those goals that we set that are based on the company's goals, right? So if we're using the company's money to do something, how is it going to benefit the company and how is it going to benefit the people who are attending? And so that's kind of how I think about budget.
Well, I just tried to copy and paste something and it turned off my video. So that's a new shortcut. That was a really great answer. And, I think I shared with both of you, we're going to be taking some of the insights today and turning it into a guide or resource for everyone. And I think you just walked us through some really nice steps there. So thank you. I think this ties really nicely into something we got a few questions on. What's the relationship between HR or people and culture team and ERGs? Is this something that should be led and established by the HR function internally? Which ERGs are we going to have? What does that look like? Or is it something that's more employee led with HR P&C approval? This question specifically was about how to encourage that engagement in ERGs without inserting yourself as people and culture. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic to get into. Asafa, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a balance. I think to Nia's point, with being a part of a people and culture team or a DEIB team that's helping support ERGs and tying it back to the business in terms of, this being a value to the business. I think you sit at the intersection of understanding what the business needs, but also understanding what the employees and the ERG members need as well, and being able to navigate and sort of triangulate around how to make that work as an effective relationship. I think this is, always for me, like from the legal background, thinking about risk, understanding, an organization's concerns around risk, particularly around ERGs, programming, those sorts of things. I think that's a real concern that sometimes ERG leaders don't necessarily appreciate or might completely disregard, but I think it's an important one, right? And I think being able to be that facilitator of how do we sort of mitigate risk that will sort of allow ERGs to action the things that they want, or how do we bring in the legal team or a key stakeholder to be able to help advise and get that insight. Oftentimes ERG leaders aren't even aware that there's a process in place that has to be followed. And so this is where I think really being that facilitator to help navigate what are the interests that the ERGs have, how can we accomplish those goals in line with what the business sort of processes are, or sort of what the business priorities are, to make sure that it's an effective situation for all stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Anything to add there, Nia? Great answer.
Yeah. I mean, just to build on that, I think it starts with equipping your leaders. I think it starts with making sure that they have all the tools and resources they need to be able to lead effectively without you having to step in as a people and culture representative, right? So, of course, you're always there for escalated issues or if they need assistance or support. But I really believe in empowering the leaders to be able to lead their groups effectively for a few reasons. But one of the main ones being is typically when you have identity-based groups, the leadership of that group are underrepresented people. And they get opportunities to develop leadership skills that they wouldn't necessarily be able to develop in their day-to-day role if they're an individual contributor or things like that. And so I really see involvement and leadership within the DEI space as an opportunity for career development for these underrepresented people. And so for that reason, I like to create resource guides. So ERG leadership resource guides specifically for each position. So
Yeah.
let's say you have a treasurer. In that resource guide, you're going to want to include, here's your finance contact. This is the process that you use to work with finance. This is how far in advance you need to submit a proposal. So it has all of the steps that they need in order to do it themselves. I think this also really depends on your maturity level as an organization in terms of where your ERGs are. I think more established ERGs, you can be a little bit more hands-off. But when you're first starting ERGs, it's really important to serve as a very involved support to the leadership. But you have the ERG leadership serve as the face to drive engagement for the company.
Love that.
Just building on all of the things that Nia said, which I think are spot on. I think another piece that I think about, which this reminds me of, is really the importance of onboarding effectively.
Yeah.
So really getting your ERG leaders to be set up for success with one of the things that we did in one of my previous roles was, as part of the onboarding, we invited all of those key internal partners. So our comms folks, our finance folks, our legal folks, to really, one, be able to share a lot of those practices and tips, but really answer the questions. And so that folks have the knowledge and resource as they start out in those roles to be able to effectively partner with those key collaborators towards the things that they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. I want to be cognizant of time, but also make sure we touch on this part. We've got ERGs in place, we've got executive sponsorship, budget approved. We're at that stage now. Now it's running ongoing engagement and programming. A lot of times, or I hear this a lot. Employees say they want something, and then we do it, and then we don't get the engagement that we necessarily wanted. What strategies have you found effective in either growing ERG membership, making sure, or not making sure, but encouraging really great engagement, especially if you've got a distributed or decentralized structure? And I do have another great question from the chat that I want to ask. So, Nia, I'll throw this question to you first, and then Osafo, I may ask you the question from the chat next.
Awesome. So basically the question is, how do you grow the ERGs?
Yeah.
I think the main thing is to talk about them and make the pathways to join them incredibly accessible and repeat it all the time. Make sure there are plenty of touch points within the employee life cycle, the employee experience, where they're hearing about the ERGs, when they're learning what the opportunities are. So in new hire onboarding, what is the process? Are you giving people opportunities to find ERGs and join them? How are you involving ERG leadership during onboarding to start recruiting people when they first join the organization? What about on a yearly cadence? I know at one of our organizations, we did quarterly open houses for ERGs, where people in the organization could join and enter a breakout room with a lead and learn more about the ERG and what activities have been happening, or do some type of a connection moment that can give an idea of what joining an ERG would be like. So I definitely think talking about it all the time is very important, but also this is what you can do as a DEI&B program manager or a people and culture liaison, is boost the stories about ERGs as much as you possibly can. Involve them in employee all hands, involve them in kickoff conversations, involve them in your monthly or quarterly town halls, where you're shouting out the work that these ERGs are doing, not only does that increase involvement, but it increases morale and serves as appreciation for the leaders who are doing that work. So I think those are the two main things I would say.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And I think segues into this question. So I just received this from a anonymous question live. So thinking about ERG membership and growing engagement, I know we spoke at the beginning about really involving allies in the conversation. But the question is, with regards to allyship, sometimes we hesitate including allies because we've had feedback where the group won't feel as comfortable sharing lived experiences when there's someone who doesn't identify within that group in the chat. What's the best way to support that scenario? What do you think about that? I'm sure you'll both have answers on this. So Osafo, if you can go first.
Yeah, I think that's one of the trickier ones. Just quite frankly, I think there's going to be this balance in terms of, again, like joining and gathering around a shared identity or background that is an important part of why the group exists. So I think even just understanding and being able to really reinforce allyship at the broader level, right, in the organization, to really reinforce that for us to advance belonging and representation really does require allyship to bring people into conversations that they may not have been a part of that are really important to advancing the work. So I think that that's a piece of the conversation. I think when there are sensitive times like that of conversation that are needed, having allies understand the importance of spaces that might need to actually or open up space so that the voices that are centered are the folks from a particular community at a particular time. I think that is a part of allyship, and really having folks understand the importance of that, I think is a really critical piece of it. But I also think, again, we want our ERGs, or sort of as we think about belonging, we do want our ERGs and our interest groups to be a space that everyone feels welcome and included, and that they can contribute something to advancing that larger goal. So for a particular community, allyship, advancing the goal for that underrepresented or marginalized community, and sort of bringing and galvanizing as many resources as we can towards those ends, I think is an important value that we can sort of share with those members from the demographic to say, it can actually benefit us moving the ball and sort of bringing more hands to the table.
Mm-hmm. And I think, something we've seen that works well in just like getting started is before even diving into specific topics or, the specific themes that your different groups want to discuss, seeing teams running workshops like how to have difficult conversations or, how to communicate with one another, just those sort of basic workplace skills that we all really, really need to develop as a muscle, can be a nice thing to do in tandem. Nia, what are your thoughts on this question?
Hopefully, I don't repeat anything that Osafo said. My computer started having some technical issues, so I hope
back now. You're back?
I'm back. I'm
Okay.
back. I'm good. So for me, it's about curating spaces for identifiers only and identifiers and allies. So at a previous company I worked at, we had a private channel and a public channel for each ERG. The public channel was open to both allies and identifiers, and the private channel was open to identifiers only. And we had a process for adding people to those channels that was safe and anonymous. Not a lot of people had access to that data just because we wanted to protect people, for instance, in our pride groups who may not have been out at work. And so within those private chats, a lot of times they had those conversations that they weren't as comfortable having with allies. But there was still a lot of traffic in the public channel as well about general topics that people who identified as a part of that community felt comfortable sharing with people outside. A lot of times in that public channel, is where they would share educational pieces or start a conversation or share resources and tools. Whereas in the private channel, they might have a conversation about something that's going on in the world and how it feels or how it's impacting them. Same with programming. There were some identifier only types of programs that might focus on more specific topics, like for the Pride group, coming out at work. Where maybe people are sharing more intimate stories that they don't necessarily want people who don't identify as part of that community to hear. Or you do a public facing org wide or member identifier plus allyship type of events where it's around just the history or education of a people, not necessarily focused on personal experience, that feels safer, that feels helpful for all people involved. So that's what I'd say.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the answer. We're getting some really good feedback and comments in the chat. So thank you to everyone for engaging as well. I've got another question. Love all these live questions. So, want to make sure we answer these. Have you ever leveraged ERGs or how your company supports DEIB programming in general as part of the recruitment or hiring process? We had someone here ask, what are you seeing as best practices as it relates to the recruitment process? Yeah, curious your thoughts there. Osafo, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've definitely, I think again, I think there are nuances here, right? So I think there are opportunities in terms of your recruitment pipeline to start really early. So in my prior role, we were at JetBlue Airways, and so STEM was really important, and thinking about the underrepresentation of women in flight ops and being pilots and things of that nature. So our women's ERG started a program, Fly Like a Girl, which was a springboard for getting young girls to see themselves in an industry where they're underrepresented. And so these were young, adolescents, but that was a opportunity to really plant seeds very early in terms of building a larger sort of foundation of young girls who would be interested in STEM, who again could much later down the line feed into opportunities for diversifying this industry in terms of what was important to us. So that would be an instance again where not immediately bringing in candidates right away, but from a CSR organizational level in terms of working with the community, was really advancing a broader mission to diversify and bring in underrepresented identities into our industry in the longer term systemic way. And so that was something that I've seen work really well. It became a signature program for this group. And I think it's really helped with down the line recruitment and advancing women in the aviation industry.
I love that example. And, we often talk about at Wavy how company culture is not just internal. There's usually more stakeholders involved in the organization, your talent community, talent pool, your customers or end users, communities that you impact, investors, shareholders, like all of these folks are stakeholders within your company. So when you can extend these practices out, I think that's really, really powerful. And we've seen some companies do some really interesting things with their talent community or their customers, kind of including them as part of these conversations, celebrations, recognition, which is great. Nia, what do you think about the recruiting side of things?
First, I love Fly Like a Girl. I think that is so cool. And I'm glad that program is still going today. So when I think about it from a recruiting pipeline stage. So one of the previous companies I worked at was Greenhouse Software, which was an applicant tracking system. And so it was all about the different stages of the recruitment process. And so that's kind of how I think about it in my brain. And one thing that's really important is leveraging your ERGs and your DEIB policies on your career page. We know, and I wish I had this statistic at the tip of my tongue, but I don't. We know that especially Gen Z and diverse candidates are more likely to join an organization when they see that they have active employee resource groups and or diversity inclusion strategies. And so you may be losing candidates without even knowing that you're losing candidates because you aren't reflecting the work that you're doing on your career site or to an external facing audience. Another thing is to partner with the recruitment team and make sure that they're equipped to have conversations about what DEI looks like at the company and what the ERGs are like and what those goals are. One of my previous goals was to create a guide for our recruitment partners that they could actually share with incoming candidates that had information we were willing to share externally around our ERGs. And that way, when they ask the question, hey, you know, what does DEI look like? They can actually receive something in hand or on screen that details how they can see themselves at work. And I think that's really important.
I love that. Yeah, when there's real examples and stories and proof points on careers pages, I think it makes all the difference, partnering with marketing, partnering with talent to make sure that's part of it. And for the most part, customers like to see that stuff too. So yeah, that's really great. One of my favorite lines on this topic that I've heard, and a big tech panel, they were like, how do we get more women engineers applying to our company? And I think one of the women just answered, have women in leadership and as your CTO or technology leaders. So if people can identify with and see real leadership support, it makes a big difference as well. We do have a request in the chat, Nia, to recap the golden triangle. Maria Elena Martinez said, I'd love to use this for helping structure these groups at their company.
I love that. I love that. I'm not going to say the components again because they're not my components, but the point of that was that is a mission or a focus for our organization, the organization that I work for. And so I tied what's important to our senior leadership to our ERG goals. And so even using the golden triangle, I don't know would be effective for you if that's not what your leadership team is talking about, if that's not what language they're using to talk about the impact they want to create as an organization. So what I would recommend you do is start looking at your company intranet, start having conversations with leaders, your chief people officer, people who have access to the language that the senior leaders are using to measure impact in your organization, and mirror that language in the ERG goals that you create.
Really great point. Actually, in our last community event with Brandon Samet, the Chief People Officer of Zapier, he shared, and I'm going to paraphrase, but a really powerful way to move initiatives forward is to ask leaders, what would you need to see in order to make this change or make this happen? Kind of tying this back to the ROI or impact side of things. Usually that'll get people to stop and think, maybe take a little bit of time to respond or the next day. But if you can align it to that question, that may help. We're getting close to time. I know we've talked about a lot of things here today. Asafo, we will start with you. If you were to give people a tip or a piece of advice to walk away with, I think we've talked a lot about getting started with ERGs or getting leadership buy-in. Like, what would you want people to walk away with that they can think about for the rest of the day or take back into their organization?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things that are so important to this work and sort of ERGs and the value they provide in organizations. I think there's a huge opportunity for in the recognition space, right?
Yeah.
ERG leaders carry so much and are sometimes asked to do a lot and take that on themselves. And whether that's having difficult conversations to social events, social justice events, all sorts of things. And they're really concerned about their community. So I would say think about what recognition looks like in terms of your organization, working with your leadership team So what that could look like, again, premium swag is a really great thing, that again, makes a big difference. I think visibility to leadership, the ability to be in a room with leadership and share out what you're doing, the importance of that work. I think seeing being seen as leaders by the senior leadership team, all those things go to sustaining morale, to really really deepening the value proposition for the folks who are signing up and raising their hand to do this work alongside their day jobs. So I think really think about all of the different ways that you can create value and recognize the work for ERG leaders and members as part of a crucial piece of sustaining them and growing them.
Thank you. Really great tips. Nia, any walk away and think about the rest of the day or final tips for folks to bring into their organizations?
Sure, sure. I feel like I beat this drum all of the time, but DEI is not one size fits all per organization. ERG structures are not one size fits all per organization. And you will not be successful if you just copy and paste a strategy from another organization. Talk to your employees, find out what they're looking for, find out what they need, look at your business goals, find out what areas you can create impact in, and then design your structure based on that. Design the number of roles you have based on that. Design the initiatives that you have based on that. And then refresh and redo every 3 or so years. Ask those questions again. Find out if the employee needs are still the same thing, if the company needs are still the same thing, and make sure that you're tailoring your ERG programming and your DEI programming to the people that will be a part of it.
I love that. I think people often come to us saying, hey, what should we do for our culture? What are other companies doing? And one of my favorite definitions of culture is that it's the sum of the 100 most recent interactions you've had with an organization or with the community. So it looks different everywhere. I think there's good stories and examples and some best practices we can share, but how it actually comes to life is really unique to each organization. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really enjoyed the conversation and how engaged everyone was in the chat. We got some really great questions there. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be sending this out as a recording link. We've got a little gift from Wavy, and we'll also be putting this together as a resource that our community can access on our blog going forward. Nia and Osafo, so thankful to have both of you leading the discussion today. I know I learned a lot, and I'm excited to re-listen to the recording to pull out certain quotes and insights. But excited to keep the conversation going, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.